Hello and welcome to the Minority Arts Appreciation Society podcast. I'm Josh,
I'm Mattie.
and today we've got a special guest, Jacob Parkins. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jacob. Do I need to say any more, really? I don't know.
I
That's
mean,
kind of
I, I
more
mean, I
my...
want to get something off my chest.
Okay. Get something off your chest.
We got these niggas looking at me like they've never seen a nigga put a real ass fucking podcast together. They're so used to looking at these goddamn Instagram. Your niggas seen these Instagram pages where they literally told the entire podcast like head to toe, nigga. So today, Jacob Parkins doesn't happen to have anything on the top of his head, but he does have the Supreme Playboy collab jacket on, and we're just gonna go ahead and skip to the rest of the podcast where we review the albums. So that was my opening skit this week. I'm very proud of it.
Very.
So aggressive. I just called two white people the N-word in quick succession.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard you say the N-word so many times in such a short space of time.
So yeah, so today we're reviewing our two new albums that we're reviewing are Injury Reserve's self-titled and The Mountain Goats in League with Dragons. And then for our previously released album, we're reviewing the 1975 I Like It When You Sleep, For You Are So Beautiful Yet So Unaware of It. Oof. Okay. So
Worst album title of all time.
Sounds like something a pervert would say, doesn't it? You know.
Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna get into it. Are you guys ready to start?
Yeah, of course I am.
Yeah.
So let's start with this new Injury Reserve podcast. So for anyone who doesn't know, Injury Reserve are a hip hop outfit from Arizona. I've actually been a pretty huge fan of them for a few years since their first mixtape, Live from the Dentist Office. And yeah, they're very much in that like realm of like indie rap and kind of that realm of rap, kind of similar to JPEG Mafia and Brockhampton, that goes for kind of like lots of mainstream pop rap sounds, but experiments with them in a way that kind of brings forward a certain fan base. And I think you get interesting songs out of that. And this is their debut studio album. So really, this is their big splash. So what did you guys make of this album?
I really enjoyed it. As per usual, this is my introduction to Injury Reserve. And yeah, pretty much from the moment it gets started, you're kind of in. It starts off like with this pretty fantastic, like I want to say shrieking, but it's a bit too low pitch for that. But it made me so excited just because I knew exactly what it was going to be from the moment it started, and I knew that what it was going to be something I loved. So yeah, I really enjoyed it overall.
Awesome. I mean, I'm happy I finally got you hearing some Injury Reserve songs. How about you, Jacob? What did you make of it? And what's your history with the group? Or yeah.
Like Matthew, this was my first sort of experience with Injury Reserve. And I also really dug it. It was really good. I thought the lyrics were like great. Really fun, and a lot of the songs were interesting in sort of like ways which hopefully we'll get into with like the more in-depth discussion which comes up, right? Yeah, I really dug it.
Yeah, the lyrics are hilarious. Honestly, so many great like little skits and one-liners that just are. Yeah, I think I think I pretty much have a lyric like one line that I've written down for each song that just kind of basically made me laugh out loud. Like especially one that I'm going to talk about when we talk about it properly. But yeah, no, I loved it. I loved it.
That's awesome. I'm coming at this from a very like strange angle. As the Injury Reserve super fan, I think this is one of the best things to happen to hip hop in the decade. This group, I mean. So when that first single Jawbreaker came out, featuring Rico Nasty, holy shit, I was fucking floored. Like I was literally every day listening to Jawbreaker until Jailbreak the Tesla came out featuring Amine, and then every day I was listening to Jailbreak the Tesla. So I was like, okay, this is it. One of my favorite rap groups is gonna make the one of the best rap albums of the decade, and this is gonna fucking be amazing, right? And then Karina and Lime was the third single release, and that was equally amazing. Again, I like you, Mattie. I love the like screeching opening. Oh, so much adrenaline to kick the album off. It's insane and hilarious. Like the Richie with a T, the one of the more kind of charismatic voice, the way he enters into the track is just awesome. But when the album came out, I was a tad bit perplexed. I enjoyed it. However, I do feel like a lot of the deep cuts, specifically the second half of the album, just wasn't as impressive as the singles it released prior, and that run of tracks from the first five tracks. From the based on their previous work, I feel like the group are getting a bit formulaic. So they have this formula where they start off with like straight bangers for a few tracks, and then there's like an interlude, and then there's like some introspective tracks, and then the last track is like a jazz rap song, which is celebrating how far they've come in their career. And they've done this like three times now, and I feel like if this was my introduction, it wouldn't have jarred me so much, but because I'm getting so used to like the injury reserve formula, I did find it a bit a bit disappointing this time round. I don't want to understate how much I enjoyed this album overall. I'm just stating as a fan, there were certain things about it that let me down.
I remember this is something you talked about in the last episode, actually, and it's something I wrote down about this. It's that, yeah, the first half of the album, I mean, is very light-hearted and fun, and then it's like, yeah, it's this thing you mentioned where the first half is light-hearted and fun, and then they're like, okay, second half, now it's serious time, and it is quite jarring when you go from Wax On to what a year it's been. And it's just like, oh, okay, so it's kind of
Yeah.
like now you're gonna get into the deep shit. It just yeah, it doesn't give it the best overall personality, and I would say my biggest problem with this album is it over like obviously there's a lot of amazing songs on it, but overall I can't exactly say what it's about. Um, Not like Grey Area, for example, the last hip hop album we reviewed, which that is so like I listened to that and it's so obvious what it's about. It's about her and it's about her blurred emotions. Whereas this, I kind of feel like it's all like all of pretty much all of the songs on it are great, but I just don't get an overall cohesive theme for it.
I actually quite like the sort of jarring tonal shifts. If that makes sense. I really enjoy sort of like being surprised. And because I didn't really know what I was going in for, unlike you with because like I'm sure if I listened to more, I'd be like aware of the sort of formulaic nature you're bringing up. But I really enjoyed the sort of rapid contrast, like the contrast between the sort of like upbeat first half and the more sort of like deep introspective second half. Like I quite like it when an artist or artists in this case like move between sort of feelings like it creates a more diverse sounding album which I really enjoy.
I agree. Like I think what a year it's been is best part in the house are some of the best tracks on this. Don't get me wrong, and they're some of my new favorite Injury Reserve songs. Jesus Christ. The Richie Ortiz verse in Best Part of a House is a reference to a verse from a previous album where he rapped about his father's funeral and not going, and many fans like found it very touching. And this verse is like, no, I'm a piece of shit. Like this isn't a reason to think I'm cool and deep. Like I'm ashamed of myself, and I'm scared that me rapping about it makes me an egotistical bastard. Uh, like that stuff is really really cool, and I really love it. I really don't want to lose that in translation. It's just I feel like you could have sequenced this track list better to more. There's a real skill to like seamlessly going from like a more emotional track to kind of more hard hitting tracks. Um, I think like Kendrick shows this off really well on albums like "To Pimp a Butterfly." Like, you never fall into like a sort of lull. It's never like, okay, now we're in the emotional portion of the album. It's kind of like, now I'm feeling emotion, now this is a banger, now there's some emotion, now this is a quirky one. I do like, I don't think I just don't think it was deftly sequenced enough, and I think it was a bit simplistic in how they organized this album. But I don't want to take that away from some of the great moments in the second half, like "Hello," which is probably one of my favorite hip hop interludes of the year. Uh, really cool, like alternative 1 minute R&B cut from Richie T. I thought that was a really cool track. Yeah, but yeah, that's kind of my gripes of how the album flowed.
One thing I'd like to just mention quickly is there's in terms of transitioning between songs. I find this really this is such a small detail, but I find the transition between Karuna and Lime and Jawbreaker really jarring for some reason. Karuna and Lime ends like on this crazy like vocal breakdown, and then Jawbreaker starts with this like just kind of really like light percussive sounds. I just found that really jarring. I mean, I love both of the songs independently of each other, but yeah, I do just think the sequencing of the album could have been a bit better overall. Um, but yeah, that kind of. But then that doesn't mean to say that I don't individually like those songs, which is yeah, just how I feel about the album overall. Uh, I'm not gonna get into my favorite tracks right now. We'll save that for the end. But I want to talk about Rap Song Tutorial for a second, which Josh, you were talking about formulaic. This song is the best commentary on formulaic rap that I've heard for a long time. I mean, it's amazing that to me it's a criticism of like just generically putting a song together and then just like in a workmanlike fashion putting an album together just by reducing songs down to their bare elements. Hello, helicopter that never ever flies this low. What the fuck? I don't know if you guys could hear that. I'm not like hallucinating from my fever. But yeah, no. Where was I? But yeah, it's so great. It's like it's such a great commentary, but it's also just a fucking banger. Like it's so amazing when the like digital voice finally says now mix and assemble your hook, and then all the elements of the song come together and Richie with the T's hook plays. It's honestly amazing, and when you first hear that hook completely independently of the beat, you're
It
like,
sounds so good, right?
yeah, it sounds so great, and you're like, I really hope this works when it does all come together, and it does. It sounds fucking amazing. Yeah, just like it's wonderful to hear like a fourth wall breaking song, which isn't something you get a whole lot. So yeah, I loved that.
Yeah, I've never heard a rap song do that before. That was completely and utterly unique and surprising, and I completely adore it as you do. Uh,
Thank God
Jacob,
it's
oh sorry, go on.
just very quickly. Thank God it wasn't a single. Like it's like I think it's
Mm.
especially great that it's a deep cut. And it just kind of happens. Yeah, it's awesome.
Jacob, are there any tracks you'd like to touch on
Um,
that aren't in your favorite tracks, but you still want to comment on?
I mean, once again, I also like Rap Song Tutorial a lot. I really like the sort of like self-aware songwriting. And yeah, it was really interesting, but I don't think I have anything to say other than that, particularly.
Oh yeah, and one track I like to touch on before we move on to our favorite and least favorite tracks is God damn that closing track. I mean, even though yeah, it's the Idris of formula to do your kind of victory lap with a jazz rap song. I love Three Man Weave. I
Yeah.
love the kind of basketball like beat that kind of comes in with the basketball bouncing, the references to them, how they had like Hooper dreams in high school, and like Richie Ricci just wasn't very good at basketball, and like none of them really saw themselves being rappers, and that came along the way. But now they're like metaphorically doing the three-man weave of how great they are at rapping. I love that. And before we move on, like I want to say, Parker, the producer on this album, who's a member of Injury Reserve, he's the ginger white guy on the cover. One of the best producers in the game right now. Holy
Yeah, man.
shit! The things the beat switch he does in GTFU, featuring JPEG
Oh my
Mafia and
God.
Cakes the Killer, that had me like literally sweating in my room, and the way he like makes JPEG Mafia screaming "Get the fuck up!" like over it's so abrasive and
God.
shocking.
Yeah, the ending of that track where he mixes JPEG Mafia, it sounds like horrible. Like it sounds, it's just hurts. It physically hurts to listen to.
Mm.
And it's so great that like JPEG Mafia's one feature on this album. Because I checked the lyrics to make sure he didn't actually have a verse. Like he didn't just for some reason have sound different on the song, and I didn't realize it was him. But no, just the only feature he has on this album is just yelling, "Get the fuck up," like, over and over again. Like when he just says, "Fuck boy, get the fuck up," it's amazing. Like, of course that would be his feature.
Yeah, I totally agree. And also the production on Drawback the Tesla. What I find really interesting is Parker said that was like his least favorite song from the album because he felt like it was the most kind of conventional. It felt too easy, like of a banger. But goddamn, making a beat out of Tesla sounds and like key noises,
Yeah.
amazing. Anyway, let's move on. What are your guys' three favorite tracks, and what's your least favorite track? Matty, you go first.
Okay. I promise I've picked at this point. So Rap's song tutorial is definitely a favorite. I've talked about that enough already at this point though. I'm gonna say next up will be Get the Fuck Up. I love Get the Fuck Up. It's fucking great. Just great. So abrasive. Sounds so horrible towards the end. I love it. And yeah, this was I was almost going with kind of all bangers, so I'm gonna go with for the last spot, best spot in the house. Yeah, like it's so great. It's Richie, yeah, Richie with the T's verse, just about like the idealization we can have of artists, and how easy it is to turn genuinely morally reprehensible acts into like things you admire about a person for even voicing those things. It's just it's so interesting, and reminds you that even though those elements can make people seem more human, that doesn't mean that that's admirable. The admirable nature of putting that act into song doesn't negate the like immorality of the act itself. Yeah, I love that so much. Yeah, those are my three favorites. I would say my least favorite is probably this is really hard. This is really hard. Um, I did pick it, but now I'm just thinking. No, yeah, it's New Hawaii. It's New Hawaii. I just it's
The dram cut.
yeah. I just it's probably the weakest part on the album for me. I just like it's one of those songs where I like keep forgetting what it sounds like and forgetting that it's there. This sounds so harsh. But yeah, I kind of like every time I would revisit the album, I'd put it on. I'd be like, hang on, this is on this album. Like it just yeah, just really didn't work for me and really wasn't very memorable. So yeah, that's probably by far my least favorite song. And I would of course recommend this album. It is wonderful. I wouldn't even say wonderful actually. Jaw-breaking is what I would call this. It's so great. You'll be thinking about this one for weeks after you listen to it, and you'll be coming back to it every day, and for a load of different reasons. And yeah, while we talked about how, uh, uh, like for me and Josh specifically, there's a jarring tonal shift. At least there's a lot of different reasons to come back to the album for. The considerations of more introspective elements is really interesting, but then also the bangers are so fucking good and so sticky and just will honestly stay with you for ages. So I would 100% recommend this.
How about you, Jacob?
Okay, so first favorite, probably Jailbreak the Tesla.
Yeah,
Uh,
honestly,
it's
so great.
simply for the line, Elon on them shrooms.
And
Yeah,
Brian's
that's
voice
great.
is going to be the
Right.
GPS.
Grimes' voice gonna be the GPS. Honestly, is the best line on the album. Oh, that's amazing.
Just that image. I was like listening to it like at 12 in the night, and I just heard that line and just laughed.
Yeah, yeah.
Really.
Oh, and
Like,
also the line of your engine go grrr, my engine go.
And then it's silent because it's a test.
Yeah.
It's like such a stupid joke, but it makes so much sense. Yeah, sorry, go on, Jacob.
Go on, Jacob.
yeah, honestly, you know, I have a weird thing for Silicon Valley weirdos. Like, I just find them interesting. So, and like with a song like that as the main theme, you know, I enjoyed it. Like, I mean, my second favorite song was probably "Best Spot in the House." As wow. Because like once again, the sort of introspection and self-loathing. Like, I think it takes a lot of guts to like be able to viscerally hate yourself, like, but in a lyrical form. Like that takes real bravery. And like, I mean, I know you're not meant to admire him, but like to be able to speak about that is admirable. And you know, like it was really powerful. Like, which is like such a cliche way of putting it, isn't it? But like, I do appreciate like having the ability to like criticize yourself like in art, which is like requires a degree of reflexivity which you just don't have doing it normally, which makes it even more difficult. So that was really impressive. And then on a lighter note, third favorite track, Freeman Weave, which was just like tremendous fun.
Yeah, the
Really,
hook
really
is
great.
so great. The hook is so great. It's just really fun, really fun.
I think like if like in terms of like listening on repeat, like if I'm gonna revisit a track, it's probably gonna be Freeman Weave, because it's just great. It's really really just great.
And I love the way those horns are mixed by Parker. Like they sound so
yeah.
lush.
And then finally, least favorite, probably just Gravy and Biscuits. Like I just wasn't feeling it that much. It like I mean, there's tons of really really great tracks on this album, and like I felt limited by the free track favorite choice, which I don't for the other albums we're discussing. Interesting. So like I mean, I do think my pick of Gravy and Biscuits as my least favorite is pretty arbitrary, but that's simply because it was just the one which didn't stand out as much as the others.
Oh,
If
hold
that
on
makes
one
sense.
sec. There's like some weird. I'm hearing some weird echo stuff.
It's
Don't
not
worry,
from it's from it's
we'll
not
edit
from
this
me.
out.
Yeah, I heard like a noise in the background. Is Jacob? Is that stuff happening in your house?
Yeah, the cleaners were in.
That's
Oh,
okay. Don't worry
okay,
about
cool.
it.
No, don't worry. It was just if like my mic was making like these
I thought I was just
crazy
hearing screaming. I was like, am I
avant-garde,
going insane?
No, just the dulcet
Oh
Geordie accents.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. Sorry.
Gravy, everything good.
Everything.
Yeah,
Perfect gravy and biscuit.
like it was
All right.
fine. It just didn't
Yeah,
stand
yeah.
out as much as the other tracks.
I agree. I agree.
And in terms of recommendation, yeah, for sure. Like I don't listen to a ton of rap. And this was definitely sort of like not within what I usually listen to, which is great that I've had a chance to actually listen to it. Because I've really enjoyed it, and I'm gonna have to check out their other stuff now. Which is great, like to find new artists.
They've got like a good back catalog to sink your teeth into now, so there's plenty more to come.
Yeah.
And I just want to defend Gravy and Biscuits purely for
I
the
think
line.
you're on your own here.
What? Purely for the line. I could tell you just took the Uber sticker off your window. It's such a like specific insult. Like it's so. I feel like there's probably like a friend of theirs that's listening to this, and then just like hears that line and just goes, "Wait, they're talking about fucking me. Fuck you." That line's so good. Gravy and Biscuits is wonderful. Fuck you guys.
Oh, man, no, I mean there was a line about Mavis Beacon thumbs cramping, which like boy, a Mavis Beacon teacher's typing reference. Like Jesus Christ, that's great. But it just didn't stand out as much as the other tracks, which is like, I mean it's still brilliant. Like, I mean I did have trouble picking my least favorite, so I do like I dislike it, but just like compared to everything else.
And as I move on to my fave, least fave, and recommend, I just want to say, yeah, I agree with Jacob. Like, I do think Gravy and Biscuits, it was in the runners up for my least fave, and it was fun, it was fine, but it was a bit, it wasn't as impressive as the rest of the album. And yeah. But yeah, so for my favorite track, well, my three favorite tracks, I'm gonna go over Jawbreaker featuring Rika Nasty and is it Proteins? Uh, I think this track is insanely experimental. I can't believe they pulled it off. I love the monologue Richie Fatigue gives at the beginning. It's hilarious. It very seamlessly flows into the rapping, and the way they bring Rico Nasty in was insane. I've never seen Rika Nasty get this introspective in a song before. The line about like writing down raps so she doesn't kill herself, and about her mother's advice, and about how black women are viewed as like in the world of like the hetero white normative beauty standards. I really love that verse, and I thought that track was awesome. And I love the gang vocals at the end, and they're all screaming the hook. It really riles me up and gets you ready for GTFU. Uh, then my next one of my favorite tracks, I gotta go Jailbreak the Tesla. I've never really been an Armane fan. I found him corny and whack. But on this track, yo, he went off, and I wasn't ready for it. And it's honestly one of my favorite rap verses of the year. All the lines you mentioned before, I think, are hilarious, and that beat is just disgusting. And then, while there's so many other good tracks I could have gone with, I gotta go Cruel and Lime for my next favorite track. I love the wordplay with so Groggs always raps about alcohol because he's an alcoholic and he references that on this album, but the wordplay with Korean and Lime being both the currency of a different state that he's in, I mean country, but also like the drink he's drinking, that was a sick line. And I love Richie Richie's introduction, and I think this is really a display of all three members of the group just flexing, with Parker making this weird ass wonky beat work as a sick rap song. So those are my favorite songs. And for least favorite track, I was originally gonna go with Wax On, but because I think it's a bit boring. But I do like Freddie Gibbs' verse. So I agree with you, Matthew. I'm gonna go with New Hawaii. That track's fucking dull as shit. I never re-listen to it. Whenever it comes on, I just kind of want to get to Free Man Weave, and it doesn't like fit. It doesn't do anything. I guess it's kind of a nice like love song about his wife, but Richard T has done way better kind of like love songy tracks in the past, and this is just not one of them.
His flow is so lifeless.
Yeah, it did felt really half-hearted, and it's like the longest track on the album. Like it's 4 minutes and 36 seconds long, and nothing happens. It's really meandering. But yeah, overall, I'd really recommend this album. It's great. I don't think it's their best project. I think y'all should all fucking go back and listen to that live at the dentist's office, man. That original mixtape. That's where the fire's at. But this is great as well. And they've come really far as producers, and really forward-thinking production, really experimental, interesting, but also fun and accessible raps. And yeah, this is a seminal album. I'm really happy you got to talk about it.
Woo!
And moving on to our second album, we are discussing the Mountain Goats in League with Dragons. Now, fun story. Jacob was brought onto the podcast for his expertise knowledge of the Mountain Goats. I too am a big fan of the Mountain Goats, but Jacob is even bigger of a fan. So I thought that it'd be great to get his opinion on the album. He's the mega fan here. So let's just kick off with Jacob. What's the history of the Mountain Goats, and how did you feel about this new album?
Awesome. So Mountain Goats, first album I properly listened to was Beat the Champ, which I think is interesting because it's like a really, really committed concept album. Every track is connected to the theme of professional wrestling. Likewise, their next album, Goths, which was released in 2017, does the same thing. And within League with Dragons, I was expecting something similar because all the press about it was this is the Mountain Goats Dungeons and Dragons album. You know, there's a great Hard Times article where it's like Mountain Goats releases second album about people who don't get enough sun, which is really which is what I thought it was going to be. So it's interesting to see this wasn't as sort of concept albumy as say like Goths and Beat the Champ, which I found interesting. It's more moving towards one of my favorite Mountain Goats albums, which I think is like pretty underrated. Something like Heretic Pride, where the concept is more a theme than like a thing. The theme I think in this album, escapism is one of them, and sort of aging is the other. I mean, this is like super overt in younger and stuff, but in other tracks, like there's a real focus on like escaping. I think mostly in stuff like going invisible and stuff, you know, burning everything down. There's this desire to live something differently, which I think is really, really strong.
I just like to add, like, also like Passaic 1975, that in my opinion the first track that really breaks through from the theme being like about Ozzy Osbourne's drug addiction. Um, Even though it breaks from the concept, even though it breaks from the concept, it sticks with the theme of escapism. You know, I want everyone
Yeah.
to get high. I think it's really cool that the intro of those themes throughout.
And I think this is a theme John Darnell, the frontman of Mountain Goats, has explored before. So John Darnell is also an author, and he wrote this terrifying book, like genuinely terrifying, but also like really hard to place, called Wolf and White Van, which is about a sort of play-by-paper game which leads to two teenagers' deaths, but it's super ambiguous on how that happened and why that happened and stuff, and it's really vague. So I think what I like is it's not like the book isn't an uncritical look at escapism, and I don't think this album is either. The final track, Sicilian Crest, they do a podcast, the Welcome to Night Vale people, called I Only Listen to the Mountain Goats, where John Darnell discusses his lyrical process. And if I recall correctly, Sicilian Crest is about populism to a degree. You know, the desire for like a big sort of like you know, demagogue-esque figure, let's say Donald Trump, for example, or like any other sort of fascist, right? To give you something, you know, to give because that's how fascism works. It promises something, you know, and I think that the fact that they're connecting the escapism within Dungeons and Dragons and like for musicians, you know, and like other activities to this really, really interests me. Because I think it adds like texture and doesn't make it just like, yes, it is good that we can escape. Like, escaping's only good insofar as what you're escaping to is positive, and sometimes that's difficult to tell. So yeah, that's my overall In League with the Dragons take.
That was awesome. I hadn't thought about that, a lot of that. I knew there was I listened to the Mountain Goats podcast, but ironically don't listen to it.
I only semi-listen to it. Like I don't have a ton.
How long have they been going as a band?
Oh,
Friggin'
Jesus.
decades.
I can tell. This feels like not. This isn't. I don't mean this negatively, but I can. This feels like a very. We have been doing this for a very long time. Album.
Yeah.
So, Mattie, what did you make of it?
I thought.
And what's your history of the Mountain Goats as well?
Basically nothing. I actually hadn't heard of them until you. I think I'd heard of Goths, and now that you talk about, was it Beat Champ? I actually
Beat the Champ.
Beat the Champ, Beat the Champ. I had heard of those albums actually. And yeah, I didn't actually make the mental connection until quite recently. But yeah, no. So I have basically no history. And overall, I did find this album enjoyable overall. Um, but I wouldn't say it was exactly the most memorable listen. I the first time I listened to it, I found it like a lot of the songs extremely pleasant with loads of nice guitar melodies, and the drums sounded great and everything. And also the more introspective tracks were good as well. Um, but I found it quite difficult to go back to. Um,
Mm,
I ever when I would when I was listening to it, a lot of the time it did sort of feel like I was listening to it to form opinions for the podcast rather than something like Injury Reserve, where I was just like, damn, I just fucking feel like listening to some Injury Reserve. Um, but then it was actually last night that I listened to it one last time, all the way through, and I just appreciated it a bit more for what it was. In the it like a lot of the songwriting is quite simple, but not all throughout the album, but yeah, just with a lot of pleasant melodies. And John Darnell, if that's his name, I think
mhm,
so.
yeah.
He has a really lovely, unique voice. The and when he delivers his lyrics more slowly, it almost gets into sort of like spoken word territory on certain tracks. I can't remember off the top of my head what track that was, but yeah, it was really nice overall, but not the most memorable. What did you think, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, this is all gonna hurt Jacob a lot, but I'm kind of in a similar position with you. I am a fucking huge fan of the last couple of albums. I think Goth and Beat the Champ are some of my favorite albums of the past 5 years. Beat the Champ especially is one of my favorite albums of all time. I think that's an
Mm,
album that really showcased how diverse their sound was. And that's the problem I had with this album.
Diversity is yeah
I think
not
while there's lots of really like cool and interesting lyrical moments, and some really shimmering musical moments, like Done Bleeding is a gorgeous intro, Sicilian Crest, a gorgeous outro, and I really like Passaic 1975. I think Everyone's Gonna Get High is a really fun hook. I don't have anything too deep to say about it, like Jacob did, but
it just sounds
that
great.
yeah,
It
it's
just
just that's
sounds
just a
great.
really I just really love that hook. And Clemency for the Wizard King was a outstanding track. But I felt like
Oh,
after Doc Gooden, and from that point on, I very much disengaged from the album a bit sonically, and found it difficult to stay invested. I appreciate that they ventured out from doing the um concept album thing too heavily, but I kind of miss the heady days of Beat the Champ, where they stunned me by showing they could do a concept album and make me really emotionally invest in the storyline and the characters. In this, I
mm.
didn't really fully was able to get to that emotional place. So I struggled to really love this album. When it's on, it's pleasant, but I don't really feel a great urge to go back to it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with both of you. Like, compared to Beat the Champ and Goth, this is like a weak Mountain Goats album. It
yeah.
isn't as diverse in terms of sound. I think it does have its emotional moments, but it doesn't hit the high points of stuff like Transcendental Youth or like earlier stuff like the Sunset Tree, which I would strongly recommend because that album actually makes me cry. Uh and yeah, no, like it's a shame because with Goths, like they really changed their sound, but to go back to a bit more simpler stuff. So I do agree. Like I don't think it is the best example of a Mountain Goats album, and I will admit I was a little bit disappointed by it. I still enjoyed it, but mostly just at a lyrical level. I don't think it's their most interesting album, and it's certainly not one I recommend unless
Mm.
you're like already into the band. There's better places to start listening. The Sunset Tree being one, Transcendental Youth, um, and
Get
even
lonely.
oh god, I have a thing because against Get Lonely, not because it's a bad album, but because one of my friends has only listened to Get Lonely, and I don't think it is the best.
Basically, Get Lonely is the OK Computer of the Mountain Goats. It's a really good
Yeah.
album, but it's also the album that everyone who isn't a Radiohead fan has heard and liked, but won't listen to other Radiohead albums, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Get Lonely is, you know, I lost count of the conversations I've had with this guy about how getting viscerally annoyed that he refuses to listen to anything other than Get Lonely.
It's really interesting to hear you say that the band, the sound of the band has been so diverse up until this point, because yeah, this album is so monotone that to me as a new listener to the band, it felt like part of a this sounds so harsh, but a gradual descent into like monotony from previous heights. I know that they'd been going on for quite vaguely
Yeah.
for quite some time, but Goth came out what last year, the year before that, was it?
Yeah, 2017.
It's really, yeah, it's just really interesting to me that they could go from such heights to, I don't want to say such lows because this isn't a bad album, but it's, yeah, it's almost generic in just like, I feel like this is when someone says the genre indie folk, like this is the sound that comes to mind, and and I don't mean that in a positive way. Like it it's it just, but no, yeah, just to come back, yeah, it just like this doesn't feel like an album that you would put out after such heights. This feels like an album that comes at the end of a long descent from quality. Uh and talk about the more, for me, the things I like about this album are the songs that just sound quite pleasant. And that's quite like, I don't know. It feels quite, that's quite like a surface level enjoyment. And then when there are the more emotional songs, I feel like they're just quite meandering. Like Possum by Night, I feel like it just doesn't really go anywhere.
Okay, may I just add that Possum by Night is a concept song from the perspective of a possum. And when he sang Grow Fat and Grow Old and Go Blind and Be Content, damn, I really felt that. I've never like empathized with a possum this much since Over the Hedge. That's my defense of Possum by Night. Okay.
I actually really like Boston by Night.
I'm
Although,
I'm just disagreeing with all of you today.
yeah,
No, I the slower songs on this album, really didn't work for me. Like Josh, I know you like Clemency for the Wizard King. Not a fan.
Oh,
That is
okay.
this when it that is the, like I said, this is indie folk. This is the sound of indie folk, and not in a good way. This is the sound of indie folk does indie folk band does a song with a fantasy-esque title. Like it's so, oh, it's so like just like old medieval. Like it's just so generic to me, and obviously not in like a pop song way, but in just like, ugh, the lyrics are so just like, I just couldn't stand it. I just couldn't stand it, to be honest with you.
yeah, no, it's definitely not their best album, and they do like I do think the fantasy theme can be cliche for sure. And they do deal with
Yeah, yeah.
other forms of pulp literature really interesting. Like the album I compared it to earlier, Heretic Pride, has
Mm.
like a lot of stuff engaging with like horror and hard boiled fiction,
Oh,
which
that's
like
cool.
is really, really interesting and unique. There's a track called How to Embrace a Swamp Creature, which is beautiful. And I strongly like, even it's more generic than other Mountain Goats albums, and it does have that more indie folk sound compared to something more like creative like Goths, but
Mm.
it just does it so much better, which is a shame. You know,
Yeah, this is an album that like, yeah, it makes me want to go and listen to their other stuff because I would like to hear the same like potential and talent that I can hear on this just executed really well. Like hearing you guys talk about these albums that are so great from them genuinely does make me excited to listen to them, because I can imagine them doing something great, like something really great, because of songs like Younger, which like which I really enjoy. And I'd love to hear an album like of all of that quality. It's just that this one overall isn't for me.
All right. Well, I'm gonna move on to album recommendations and favorite tracks and least favorite tracks.
Mm-hmm.
I'll start this time. My favorite track was "Clemency" for the Wizard King. Mattie is a heretic. She has no love for the Wizard King, and it should be burnt at the stake. This is a great track. I love the soft delivery of
You just advocated for a hate crime, you motherfucker.
I love the we should also spike her head. I love the soft delivery of the "We come before you now." I think it's like really catchy and endearing. It's a very intimate and humbling moment on the album. I think there's a cool like gospel folksy vibe to this. I love the kind of the reverence in this song. I think it's really emotional and moving. And then Done Bleeding is a great album opener, as I mentioned before. And Sicilian Crest is a really cool album closer. I found it very cinematic and sweeping. Um, and now that I know that it's a fascist anthem, that makes me like it even more. So my least favorite track is Going Invisible 2. I don't remember this song. In my notes, I've written it was slow, dull, and middling, and I hated the vocals. They were mixed
Yes.
horribly. At the end of the track, the vocals start to rise, and they get louder, but they're being mixed so terribly that it just sounds like they're getting distorted, and it's bad. It's the only song that, here and here that I think is generally bad. Um, but yeah, to move on to my recommendation, I would honestly give this a weak recommend. I don't hate it as much as Matty does, but I do think it's worth listening to. An album I was thinking about when Matty was talking about how this feels like a late career album was Iron Maiden's Book of Souls. Iron Maiden Book of Souls is an album that is a 16th studio album from a band that's been going since the 80s. And when I first heard that album, I was like, holy shit, this is just as good as their like prime stuff. And I was so viscerally impressed that it was still making quality shit at 15, 16 albums.
Mm.
And, Mountain Goats haven't been going on for that long. But yeah, no, it's tough. It's tough to get a Book of Souls out of you. It's tough to get a Black Star out of you late in your career. And I still think this is like a pretty quality album. I mean, there are some really shit albums coming from artists who were big in the 90s, Smashing Pumpkins. So I think this is a decent attempt. And yeah, I'd give this a weak recommend. How about you, Jacob?
Yeah, okay, so favorite tracks. My favorite track in the album is probably In League with Dragons. I just really, really enjoy the lyrical themes on it. The sort of like uh siding with traditionally villainous figures is a really, really interesting thing. And I think what I really like about the Mountain Goats is the sort of level of sympathy they have, like lyrically, for monsters, quote unquote. There's a great song called "In Memory of Satan" in Transcendental Youth, and also "Cry for Judas." In All Eternal X, they have "Damn These Vampires" and "Birth of Serpents." Like, this is, I think, one of the best examples of like how empathetic the Mountain Goats can be as a band, even if it is for a big dumb fantasy lizard. Like, I think the fact that it made me feel for that like is a testament to them at their best. And I do think it sounds like stuff off Beat the Champ, which is probably one of their best albums. So I really liked In League with Dragons. I'm going to defend Possum by Night now, which is my second favorite song. I'm a sucker for sort of dumb meandering stuff, and the once again the grow fat and grow old and go blind and be content, like that. That's like a really good encapsulation of that album thematically. Like, it doesn't like, it sums up the theme of aging really well. Something I think is good. And there's a Shakespeare quote at the end, and I know it's cliche, but I'm a literature student, and God, like, I'm just as Helen. If you quote Shakespeare, I'm probably gonna like it. Finally, yeah, I'm agreeing with Josh. Sicilian Crest. It's it's great, and it's one of those songs which you can look at in different ways, because for sure, like, you can read it uncritically, but if you look into, and I mean, I know, like, this is author sort of stuff, which, as we all know, the author is dead, stabbed by Roland Barthes in a back alley. But I do think it's interesting to view it as a fascist anthem as well, or like a sort of parody of a fascist anthem, and the desire for easy answers and stuff. And I think it kind of adds a nasty sting to the theme of escapism, like placing it right at the end of the album, which I quite like, while still being, really fun to listen to and really nice. So yeah, and least favorite, probably Doc Gooden. I just didn't feel it, at all. Just nothing, which is a shame, because usually I feel something.
And would you recommend?
Likewise, I'm gonna have to go with a soft recommend. I think it's more enjoyable if you're already a fan, and if you're like, because it is kind of a return to some themes and stuff, and like placing it in the wider context, I think does improve it. But like, if this was the first Mountain Goats album I listened to, I feel like I can understand why you wouldn't be really into it. And there are better Mountain Goats albums. I mean, once again, just listen to Beat the Champ, and then you can revisit this. But like, not for like a first time listener.
Awesome. I'll probably go ahead and do my favorites now. I actually have. I'll do it. Yeah, normally I don't order my favorite songs; they're just kind of random. But my favorite song on the album by far is "Younger." You guys haven't spoken about this one at all, so I feel like you probably don't like it very much, or
I
whatever.
like Younger.
Oh, Younger's
Okay.
cool.
Okay, cool. I really like Younger. The guitar, like, kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but the way that the guitar sounds, it's just really nice, and it just kind of plays throughout the whole thing, and the horn section, the horn sort of craziness at the end, is really fun. It sounds great, and there's these drum fills as well. The drums are really well produced on that song. I love it. Um, I'm not going to be coming back to this album, but I'll be coming back to that song. Um, Other favorite tracks, yeah, Done Bleeding is quite a nice opener, and it's good, and so much passion in the way I'm talking about this album. Um, Finally, last favorite track probably be what's it called? In League with Dragons. I think I think the way the guitars sound again is just really pleasant. And they work really well with his vocals.
Mm.
I do think they like a band that's been going on for this long. They know how to make their instruments work with their vocalists. So yeah, I think that's a really nice song. Uh, Least favorite. Um, Fuck you, Josh. Clemency for the Wizard King sucks. No, I'm kidding. I love you. But no, yeah. I just think it's really boring. And the really like twee vocals. I just find them really like jarring, basically. Um, not a fan of that song at all. And speaking for the first time listeners to the Mountain Goats, I'm not going to recommend this album. I just don't think you'll get anything out of it if you don't already listen to them. It's a bread sandwich. If you're not into this band, you just are gonna you'll eat it, and you'll listen to it, and you'll be aware that you're listening to something, but you're also just not quite. It doesn't actually feel like you're engaging with anything. But yeah, so I wouldn't recommend this album, even though it does have pleasant aspects to it. And yeah, that's my take on In League with Dragons.
All right. Well, that was fun to discuss. And it's fun to bring Jacob's wonderful, knowledgeable background to the forefront here.
Yeah, no, that
So,
was awesome.
yeah. Now we move on to our final album we are discussing, on okay, before we move on to this album, I'd like to say that uh, in regards to I Like It When You Sleep For You Are So Beautiful Yet So Unaware of It by the 1975. I'm gonna die on this molehill today. Uh, I love this album. Um, I have a long checkered history of the 1975, and I would like to start. It was the year 2014. One of my best friends was a huge fan of the band. It was the year where everywhere you went, you couldn't get away from the songs "Chocolate" and "Girls." And naturally, being the indie cool kid I was, I hated this band. I wanted to listen to Godspeed You Black Emperor, not Girls by the 1975. So 2 years later, they put this album out that we're discussing today, and the single "Love Me" was the big track of that year. And similarly, I disliked that. I thought it was a cheap Prince knockoff, and I didn't enjoy it. So I
I
never checked the
actually
album
remember
out.
that. I remember you sending it to me, and
Yeah,
we
and
both
being
didn't like
upset.
it.
Yeah, and then fast forward another 2 years, their third album, An Online Inquiry on Human Relationships or Online Relationships. Yes, all of their album titles are that obnoxious. Uh, I really fucking enjoyed it. And I was like, am I going insane? What's happening? Why am I enjoying the 1975? I really like that album. It made it my top 20 list of 2018. And yeah, and I was in my flat with one of my flatmates playing that album. And I was like, God, this is so much better than what they were doing before, right? Like, this is crazy. And she was like, dude, their last album sounded like this. And I was like, but even like the weird ambient interludes, like, and she was like, yeah, they've been doing this for a while. So I was like, oh. So I went back and listened to I Like It When You Sleep, For You Are So Beautiful Yet So Unaware of It. And I was like, holy shit, I like this even more than the new one. This is my favorite 1975 album. And I'm shocked I'm able to even say that I like a 1975 album. Now I'm coming here, I have my notes for this album are, it's great. That's it. I've come here full of zeal and passion, and I'm gonna defend this from you two, who I assume aren't as
All right.
enthusiastic about this as I am.
I think this is actually going to be the most heated discussion ever. Because genuinely, I thought you picked this album to talk about how horrible it was. I did. It's all coming back to me now that you did like one of their albums. I completely forgot that you did. And had I known that, I might have gone into this with more realistic expectations of what you would think. Um, if I'm honest, I hate this. I oh oh um I'm really curious to hear what Jacob thinks. In a second. Oh God, just that introduction. That it was like watching the Red Wedding all over again. Never have I been like so sure of something, but been so wrong and had such a horrible surprise. Um, no, Jacob, take over, please.
Okay, well,
I can't do this. I can't do this.
sounds like you need to lie down.
Yeah, honestly, I have a fever. I wasn't ready for this. I'm dying.
Yeah, no, I didn't really like it either. Not probably not as strong as Mattie, but still to the degree. I mean, like it felt like a more interesting band hidden in like a boring band.
I actually know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, like because there are some tracks like which are interesting and have seem to be something more, but then most of it just kind of blurs together. Like at a certain point, I tried to give it a proper listen, but then I just couldn't sit and just listen to it. I had to do something. I mean, like, and the ambient stuff's nice. It's fine, but lyrically, like, bland. I didn't like the frontman's voice at all.
No.
Like going from like the Mountain Goats and Injury Reserve, where they have
Oh.
to like, I just didn't feel it at all. So yeah.
Before we get into this properly,
Mm.
I this is more for myself. I would like to say that I would like this to be not just me and Jacob ganging up on Josh. I don't think
Oh.
Jacob will be doing any ganging up, but if I get overzealous at any points, I do apologize.
No,
But
I am fully prepared for that because I've come with my manifesto. I've cracked the code of the 1975, and
don't,
I have galaxy brained. Okay, I understand them now.
Going
So,
Giga Brain.
okay, I have a huge thesis about the 1975. I think they are now death of the author. It doesn't matter if this is intentional, but this is what they mean to me. I think we are presented with where pretentiousness is the place where we're writing from. And it is simultaneously pretentious and self reflexive about being pretentious. And somehow, with the fan base it's garnered, the story around the band fosters my theory about their pretentiousness. So I think the 1975, I think their whole shtick is projecting meaning onto things that don't really have meaning, that present themselves to be more than they really are, which is the definition of someone who's pretentious, right? They espout some great truth, which is quite shallow, but they take themselves very seriously. And I think the band both consciously and unconsciously do this. So with their album cover thematically, you get these like boxes, right? And it's meant to be like this profound art thing. And you could either take it as like a commentary on, I don't know, living in an era of phones, or you could take it as just an empty box. It means nothing. It's empty nostalgia for a time that you never were at, 1975. This is also true of their sound, which is obviously 80s pop, but they're called the 1975. And may I add, Matt Healy was born in the 90s. None of them lived during the 80s or the 70s. And again, I think this is that kind of pretentiousness of, but maybe intentional, maybe not, of superimposing meaning and nostalgia onto a time you never were around for. I think this is reflected in the opening track of the album as well, the 1975 song. Every album starts with this song, but a different version of it with the same lyrics. And
that's absolutely horrible.
it's this urban I really like. Okay, this is my favorite version of this opening track, and I love it. It has this, in my opinion, a really cool like urban cinematic nightlife intro, and it describes these kind of slight wordplay in the lyrics of breathing in the hair, playing with the air, and obviously there's like this intoxicated drug vibe, and there's this kind of appearance of this is a really deep cinematic kind of coming of age moment. But the song's really just about, I think, getting a blowjob while driving. There's nothing that deep about it. And I don't know if Matt Healy is aware of this. If he is, he's a fucking genius. And if he's not, then he's accidentally a genius. Because I think that's what all of their music.
Intentionally or not again, I'm going to cry.
Look, okay, definitely the author. Okay, I think there's great things we can learn from this album. Another point where we kind of get this kind of superimposing meaning where there is none is the song Paris. Sonically, I used to hate this song. It sounds really glossy and gross and like sugary.
That's the whole album. That's
But
the whole
let me
album.
finish. Let me finish. The song is a girl telling, he's romanticizing this trip to Paris he had with some girl. And he was a heroin addict at the point of making this album. And the girl, he's telling her like, I'd love if we went to Paris again. It was a really great time. And she's saying, you were just romanticizing heroin. The whole thing was just you sitting out in rooms high out of your mind. You didn't feel anything. There was nothing deep or meaningful happening. And I think that's why the song sounds like this. It's this sort of like weird, drugged out, everything's perfect and pristine, but fake. Like everything in the album sounds fake. And I think that's what, for me, makes it so brilliant. There's this great sense of like some striving for sincerity and meaning where there is none. It's just vapid. You open with songs like Love Me and Ugh, which are very much about look at me, I'm a cool pop star. And I think there is some self-deprecation there of like making fun of himself. And then I think there are moments in this album where he's trying so hard to strive for something that is more meaningful If I Believe You is a song about an atheist just begging for there to be a God, for there to be some bedrock of meaning to rest on. Please Be Naked. Obviously, this band is mainly loved by like teenage girls, and there's a huge sex appeal to them. Matt Healy is like a heartthrob in a Tim Chalamet sense, I guess. So you expect Please Be Naked to be like a raunchy kind of sexy track, and it's like a somber instrumental ballad. I think this is kind of, there's lots of themes of like casual sex in their music, and I think Please Be Naked is like, we are shallow people who have lots of casual sex, but really all anyone wants is just someone to be emotionally naked with us, someone to be intimate and close. And then you have Lost My Head, which is a song I think where I love the drowning noise, almost post-rock inspired breakdown of this song, which kind of, yeah, it's this moment of just trying so hard to find yourself when you've lost yourself in like drugs and kind of sex and beauty and fame, and you're trying to find a bedrock of meaning. Now, the reason why I keep saying intentionally and unintentionally is that whether or not Matt Healy is aware of this genius manifesto on pretentiousness and shallowness in the modern age, if he himself is pretentious and shallow, yet trying to reach some sort of deeper meaning with these horrible album titles and these long ambient interludes, then he himself is the figure that he is lampooning. He is the millennial who is shallow and meaningless and empty, but yet still is in touch with this bedrock of sadness that all humans can relate to, and is trying to reach something with a greater meaning. And that is why that's my manifesto on this album and this band. And that's why I love this so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you talked a lot about like what it means, but how do you reconcile with just how like horrible these songs sound? Like how saccharine and overproduced the instrumentals are, and just how obnoxious his vocals are. Like his vocals are just like the sort of like almost screeching of like his of in some of these choruses is, oh God, that's gonna stick with me forever, and not in a good way, obviously. Um, Jacob said that he didn't like the vocals. No, I think there's his vocals. His vocals are the least. His vocals are my least favorite part of the album, and if that so yeah, if you want to talk about this as a kind of character study, and the vocals are the main mouthpiece like for the artist in a way, especially well on this, they're the main point at which we connect with the artist. Then then it's just an immediate disconnect. He has this like weird he constantly puts on this weird like forced like inflection that trying to make him sound less posh than he obviously is. Like so many times he'll like not pronounce his T's, even though it's so obvious that he's trying so hard not to pronounce his T's. It's such a small element, but every time it happened, it pissed me off so much because it was like he was taking a breath before he said every word with a T in the middle of it, just so he could remember to do it. Because he's obviously sorry, that was very specific and very zealous. But my point is, I think his vocal performance is just grating. I actually can't remember a time where his vocals when they weren't slow didn't irritate me.
Okay, in response to the vocal thing, yeah, okay, aesthetically, sonically, there's personal preference coming in. I like the aesthetics of this album. I like the way it sounds, and I do enjoy listening to it a lot. I think vocally, I think it's a diversive. It will be a voice that is grating to some, and some will like it. I personally like it. I think it's very boyish, and there's a great leading back to what I was saying before, there's a great sense of someone who's kind of just a drugged out kid trying so hard to be like a pop star or an 80s sort of rock star.
But that's
Um,
so.
and there's this, but I think behind that, I really enjoy the flamboyance of it, the performative nature of it. And then in the more intimate moments of the album, like Nana and She Lays Down, I feel like it's stripped away a bit, and you're just left with like the raw kind of emotion of that person, and stuff like Love Me and are very like a very performative, big, I'm trying to be a pop star moments. And I get that that's jarring. Yeah, sure, that's completely fair. Personally, I enjoy it, and I like the flamboyance of it.
Yeah, Jacob, go on.
Cool. So I'm gonna respond to your manifesto because wow, really sink my teeth into because I feel exactly the same about this album as you, but that's a bad thing. That's not good. The fact that it is sort of like, I mean, vapid, saccharine, very sort of like cutesy almost, but with these moments where it breaks through, like, why can't it just be those more interesting moments? Like,
Because he
why?
really isn't that smart.
So
That's what I love about it.
what you're saying is this is an album written by an idiot, and
Yeah.
About trying to be more than an idiot, and I love it.
okay,
That's
but
what's so unlikable about him.
it's still an album written by an idiot who thinks he's clever. I know that's really cruel, but like, honestly, that I can't. Like, I mean, author's dead and so on and so forth, but I just can't read that into it. And,
I
like,
think
Can I
the
ask a
best.
question?
Okay.
What's this author's dead thing you guys keep saying?
oh, sorry. This is what you get when you bring a disgusting literature student on. So, Death of an Author is a really famous essay by Roland Barthes, who's a French literary critic. And the basic thesis statement is the author's intentionality does not matter for a work of art. The onus of interpretation and reading is completely on the reader of the work of art. So,
Yeah, I get you.
hmm.
Yeah, cool.
Okay,
Cool.
can I just say, okay, I think the Ballad of Me and My Brain is a great example of like what I think what we're all trying to say. Uh, in that song, he describes himself as like a disembodied thing looking for his brain, and it's this like moment of disassociation, and he's like, "Oh, my brain's probably in like a Sainsbury's obnoxiously flirting to some girls." Like, it is that shallow figure, but it's that faint sense that you could be more than this, and that you sort of like hate that you are this, and like you wish you could be like this great musician. I I I think the personality of this album is very much like Nicolas Cage's acting. Um, One, you're either gonna love it or you're gonna hate it, and two, the person is trying to do something interesting. They're trying to make a statement, and either you're gonna think that statement is obnoxious, or you're gonna be kind of charmed by it. So I do think this is obviously a very divisive album. I'm just presenting an alternative opinion on it.
I'm no platforming you, you son of a bitch. No, no. But my problem with this is that he includes that obnoxious character in this album as well. There are many songs on this album with that obnoxious character, and it starts off with that obnoxious character. So you start off the album just disliking him, and this is if you don't have previous experience with how pretentious this band is. And so yeah, when you do get to those moments where he's like, man, I wish I could be a better person, you don't care because you just think he's an asshole, or by that point. And if you want to be a better, like, if you don't want to be an asshole, just, if you don't want to flirt, if you don't want to just be a fuckboy, just don't be a fuckboy.
um, yeah, like, I don't see why we need the dicks on, like, as he said, like, why we, like, when he is clearly capable of introspection, and like, I really found the Ballad of Me and My Brain like super interesting. As a person with like fairly bad anxiety, like, one of my coping mechanisms is to perceive as something different from me. So that like kind of hit close, and it was
Yeah.
interesting. And sort of likewise, stuff like Nana and stuff. Like where he is, and what's the If I Believe You, like where he does do those interesting introspective stuff, they're just drowned out by their main stuff. Love Me and She's American. Like it just kind of shits on the whole
Uh,
more
but I
interesting.
think, okay, I think from a point of just empathy, I think in the music community, there's a very big like holier than thou vibe of I am too good for this, and I get that, yeah, obviously this is going for a very different demographic than us. It's going for a younger demographic. Maybe they're aiming for a more female audience, but I do think She's American, like. I get why you'd hate it, but there is a sense of that song's about being with a girl who's also as shallow as you are, and like you're like, fuck, this isn't okay. Like this isn't fulfilling. Love Me, there's this cloying loneliness and just longing to be viewed as something great and loved. And that's cool if that's annoying to you guys, but I think this is relatable. I think this is a very honest depiction of what it's like to grow up in this era, where I'm given all the platforms such as Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook to be as annoying, cloying, and desperate as I possibly can. I presented this image of myself as beautiful and worthwhile.
But just
And I get it, I get it. I think there's more here, and yeah, and I think the last couple tracks where he talks about his grandma's death and how his mother is like a addict who like neglected him and like didn't love him properly, um, kind of really round out the character study in a really nice way. You understand why he's this kind of broken, cloying, shallow person. I just think it's really interesting.
but
Yeah.
for me, meaning aside, Love Me, the things you're saying are interesting, but Love Me, like for example, I think it's just a bad song. I think it sounds terrible. Um like and so the meaning of it is lost. Like it's you can have all the I mean you talked about intention or not, but you can have all the intention of putting something meaningful into song or you like, but if you're going to produce it to sound like just terrible, like I think Love Me sounds absolutely terrible, um then I'm not going to care about the meaning. Like I like to go back, like I think I don't think music should be viewed in a vacuum at all, and I think obviously meaning should be considered. But to go back, like we listened to that "Love Me" single what like 2 years ago independently, and we just heard it, and we just said this sounds bad, it's bad, and I think that's kind of primarily what I'm coming at this from. I think he's obnoxious, yeah. But that's not actually what I dislike least about this album. I just think that there's two types of song on it, and neither of them are very good. I think like I think there's either overly saccharine like pop songs or like middling ambient tracks, and just like it's just whatever.
Well, yeah. Oh, I'm done. I've said everything I have to say about the album. I can't. I like Love Me Now. I think it's a fun track. I like the guitar licks on it. They pulled off the 80s pop aesthetic well. I like the shiny aesthetic of the album. I think it's engaging. I can't justify this because that's not a ration. The best part about music is that it's not a rational enjoyment. It's just
Mm-hmm.
this is nice for me. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've said what I can, and I'm pretty much done. Jacob, do you have any final thoughts before we move
Final
on to
thoughts. Okay. Oh
favorite
boy.
and least favorite?
So final thoughts. Final thoughts. Yeah, I think your discussion, like this entire discussion, has been about pretension, right? If we're gonna sum it up in like a thematic word, it's pretension. And as a person who gets called pretentious a fair bit, sometimes justified, sometimes not justified, um, I don't know, like, whether I find your reading of pretension, but like a sort of ironic, interesting pretension in this album, justified. Um, and I think I do have a tolerance for other more pretentious acts. I really like The World is a Beautiful Place and I'm No Longer a Die. They're uber pretentious. You know, but I think it does come back to what Mattie's pointing out, which is the sound. I just don't like the sound. So because
I
of
also don't like that song.
because of that. Like, I just can't enjoy it in the same way I would something like The World Is a Beautiful Place. I'm no longer afraid to die. Which just has a better sound from the get go. While still having a sim. So I do think ultimately it is a case of, do you dig the sound? If not, you're kind of not gonna be into this album, and
All right, I'm very proud of us. I think we handled this discussion as best as we could.
Mm.
We should all be very pleased with ourselves.
All right. Okay. I'm gonna move on to favorite tracks. I'll just start right off. I really like "If I Believe You." I like the gospel inspired track. I really like the production on it. I like the part where he says, "And I had a revelation," and it's like ah, like screeching. I think that part was awesome. I really like "Loving Someone." I think that's I mean, yeah, these are indie pop songs basically. And you either gonna love them or you can hate them. But I like the kind of chorus of "Loving Someone." I like kind of the themes of him trying to elevate himself as a celebrity, as being someone who um, is a positive influence on his audience, as opposed to someone who uh, encourages heteronormativity and kind of self-loathing and inspires self-loathing in the audience. And I just think it's a really fun song. I like it. And I really like the intro to 1955. I think it encapsulates a lot of how I feel about the entire album. I like the urban druggy aesthetic of that intro, and I think it's carried out throughout the album. I really like the backing female vocals there as well. I think it's grand. And yeah, for my least favorite track, gotta go with "The Sound." I hate "The Sound." I think songs like "The Sound," "This Must Be My Dream," Uh, those two mainly are very much like in keeping with the things you don't like about the album. That's when I really can't tolerate the aesthetics of the album and those two tracks. But overall, I would recommend this album. I think it's worth checking out. I think this is. I think I can't think of any like pop rock band that are doing something like this at the moment. Obnoxious or not, I do think it's quite unique and interesting. I can't think of anyone like Matt Healy in music right now. Um,
Thankfully.
and I'm happy that we have such diverse opinions on him because I just think that shows that they are an interesting band. I think, and they're doing something that's noteworthy in the sense that it stands out as either this will fucking hurt your ears or this is pretty cool.
Also,
And
it's
I'm on
more
the
interesting than just three people hating on the album for 20 minutes.
Yeah, and I'm on the this is pretty cool side, and I think he got slightly better with like the lyric writing in the next album. I feel like he generally tried to be introspective throughout the whole thing rather than just some of it. Uh,
Mm.
so that's why I enjoyed the third album so much. But sonically, this was my favorite one. I wish it was a bit shorter. But overall, I would recommend this. How about you guys?
Jacob, you can go first if you like.
Okay, awesome. So favorite track, overall, Ballad of Me and My Brain. I thought it was the most interesting. I guess maybe because I can connect to it more. I enjoyed it more because like I just don't connect to the casual sex stuff, and on that level. So that was really interesting. And I think he put on a little inflection in his voice, which was weird, but actually ended up giving him a bit of character, which I felt he was kind of lacking in the other tracks. Like the vocals are actually kind of interesting there, but I'm not sure if it was in a good way or not yet. Like I feel like if I'm gonna re-listen to a track from this album, it's going to be that one because that was the one which just interested me the most musically and lyrically because it did touch on that introspection, which you just didn't really like. I didn't feel as strongly came through in other tracks. Next one is Nana, because it's like simple, fairly emotional. Like it once again has that introspection, but like there's only a degree I can enjoy these songs. Like I can kind of get to enjoying them lyrically, but like I just don't like the sound. So I have trouble really, really digging it. And then finally, I guess Please Be Naked. It's like a mediocre ambient track, and my tolerance for mediocre ambient tracks is fairly high. So It was fun. I guess it was fine. It, still not the greatest, and there's more interesting ambient stuff for sure. And least favorites, she's American. And like with Jailbreak the Tesla, I have some lyric examples. Because we just don't eat and we're socially relevant. I did not like, and um synthetic apparitions of not being lonely. Just God, please. Stab my throat out now. Really, I don't need to speak anymore after saying that.
This is a really odd case of like identifying we're both identifying objective elements of the music, yet subjectively receiving them very differently. Like
Yeah.
I love how like vapid and dumb those lines are, and yet they're trying to get at something deep. Maybe it's a guilty pleasure. I hate that word, but maybe that's what it is.
Guilty pleasures aren't real, though.
But like I like it
we
for the exact same reasons you hate it. It's great.
Yeah.
In this house, we don't pleasure shame.
Anyway, go on. With your recommendation.
Oh, recommend. Well, I mean, it should be fairly. No, not really. I guess it's a matter of whose taste you agree with more. Like if you're more like Josh in terms of what you're into. Like, of course, you're probably gonna dig this album, but I don't think like I can recommend it. I certainly won't be re-listening to it. Or I might check out a brief inquiry into online relationships. The lyrics better, but I'm looking at the track list right now. Something called "Sincerity is Scary," and the robot. So that's instantly kind of putting me off.
Oh, dude, the fact the robot is like a spoken word track. It's so cringy. I love it. It's a spoken
Jesus
word song
Christ, they really
about,
are.
and he does like the OK Computer voice modulation, and he's describing the story of a man who falls in love with like his computer, and then he like dies.
They
And it's
really,
really shit, but I really like it.
they really are a more obnoxious and less pleasant sounding world. Is a beautiful place, and I'm
Who are
die.
you? Who are you, and what have you done with Josh? Honestly.
I mean, at the nubile age of 19, I'm happy I can still surprise with my music taste and
Yeah,
what I
no.
accidentally end up liking. Anyway, Mattie, you'll go.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna try and keep a level head throughout this.
You have to pick 3 favorite tracks.
I know that's annoying me.
It was brutal, Josh.
All of these favorite tracks, I feel bad using the word favorite for. These are songs that I tolerate the most. So first up, I'm gonna give the title track a shout out because it was a nice break because it was quiet and it was inoffensive.
Oh,
And I
before you go,
appreciate
turn the
that.
big light off. It's so sweet. It's like a Pixar film.
Get out of here. Get out of here. Honestly. Oh.
Jesus, Josh.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and then as in a similar vein, Please Be Naked was my least favorite songs on this are the overly saccharine pop songs, just because I find them so grating. So yeah, the ones I hate the least are the more slow ones. So Please Be Naked again, yeah. And finally, She Lays Down, fine, whatever. And then my least favorite song is Love Me. Oh. Okay, so it might well seem like I never gave this album a chance to win me over, but I really came into it and I was like, hey, you know what, music is music, and I can like anything.
I just keep looking. Ow!
Shut up. So yeah, I was like, it might be different from some of the stuff I've heard from them, or maybe hearing them over a whole album, I'll get to like them, that kind of thing. Maybe they work well on an album. This song was the moment that I knew that I was gonna spend the next hour and 15 minutes in pure misery. And it was only when I was listening to this song that I realized how long this album was. And it was such a combination of, wow, I hate this song so much, and just this crushing weight of realizing that I was stuck here for an hour and 15 minutes that has really made this one of my least favorite songs of all time, really. So, yeah, I hate it. I hate it so much. When Matt Healy says, "Love me," honestly, it's one of my least favorite moments in music ever. It encapsulates everything wrong with the album, and everything wrong with his vocals as well. Um, yeah. Overall, stay away from this album. Uh, don't. If you or a family member has been affected by "I Like It When You Sleep," for you are so beautiful yet so unaware of it, please call the number in the description. We're currently in the process of getting Josh some rehabilitation. No, I'm totally kidding. Um, uh, but yeah, I do not recommend this. By the way, am I crazy, or do you guys see what I mean about the like forced like littles and things like that?
I can't tell because in interviews, like sometimes he does sound like that a bit. It's like I think he just sings weird. Like I think he's just
Yeah.
very
Okay.
exaggerated and
I
everything.
mean,
Okay.
Yeah.
it does sound like he's putting on an affection. So I do see what you're saying there, and
Okay.
like,
Okay.
But
uh,
I do think his vocals are like affected. Like that's the whole Matt Healy vibe.
Yeah, I get.
Everything about Matt
Okay.
Healy is affected. That's why I
but
love him.
it's like affected but boring. That's the issue, you know. It's like
I don't know. I think maybe
if
because
you,
I was expecting like a Taylor Swift 1989 of this is bearable, and I got like what I got was like so much more baffling and confusing than Taylor Swift that I just got confused and ended up
You
loving it. Maybe
made.
that's what happened. I don't know. Uh,
Hey, I've been mean. I've been mean with this one. But you obviously are allowed to like this.
yeah.
yeah, no, of
I
course.
mean,
Like,
there's a line from their first album, A Song Called Heart Out, where he sings "Gotta love the way you love yourself. Your obsession with Roxanne Brown and fucking the whole town is a reflection on your mental health," which is so horrible, but also amazing, and it summarizes exactly how I feel about this band. So yeah,
okay,
that's my concluding words.
I understand. I understand. You get out of it what you get out of it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the album.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I think we've ticked all the boxes.
Woo, we have indeed.
But wait, there's more. Uh,
Oh,
I just want to give a quick shout out. We're not going to review it, but it was dope. The new Denzel Curry album, Zoo, fucking great album. Ricky, Speedboat, PAT, awesome tracks. So if anyone's still listening, go check out the new Denzel Curry album because that was pretty fire.
just to
That's all I wanted to say.
just to let people know why I don't lead the music episodes. I was literally completely unaware that there was a new Denzel Curry album. This is the first time hearing about that.
This is his best album yet. It's good.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah, well, that's it. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. We hope you have a lovely day, and thank you, Jacob Parkins, for joining us. It was
Yeah,
wonderful getting your input and voice on the podcast.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a
yeah, it's
pleasure.
been so much fun having a guest on for the first time. And yeah, it was really nice to have you around to make sure that I wasn't living in an upside down universe where the 1975 are actually good.
No, they're not. And you know.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, so I guess I'll just talk about what films we're doing on the next episode.
Go for it.
Where in the area where I do have some knowledge. Yeah, so our next episode is going to be a Godzilla special. Similarly to our Avengers episode, it's going to
Wait,
be.
you're making me watch more than one Godzilla film?
Of course I am. Of course I am. Do you not remember this?
I okay, go on.
Yeah, man. Oh, it's gonna be awesome. So
I don't have to watch a Bryan Cranston one again, do I?
Oh God, no! Don't worry. That's not a Godzilla film. That's not a Godzilla film. That film is too ashamed of Godzilla to be a Godzilla film.
Oh, what about the Matthew Broderick one?
Yeah, that's the old film we're doing. No, I'm joking. So, yeah.
I was going to say.
So, we're going to be talking about the new film Godzilla King of the Monsters. Which I'm a huge monster movie fan. I love it. I have a pretty low bar for quality. Actually, that's not true. Yeah, that's not true. But yeah, so that's the new film we're talking about, and the older film we're talking about is Shin Godzilla, which is a Japanese monster Godzilla movie that came out in 2016. And yeah, I just really want to compare the different ways the West does Godzilla movies to Japan. Who
Is it a
invented
metaphor for
Godzilla.
Hiroshima, or is it a metaphor for America's imperialism? Find out next time.
I was always under the impression that the Godzilla in the American films was a metaphor for 9/11.
Oh
Ooh,
yeah,
nice.
yeah. I actually think.
But didn't the Broderick one come out before 9/11?
I'm talking Cranston and presumably King of Monsters, which yet to.
Oh yeah, because that's what everyone's been praising about King of Monsters. It's the kind of really insightful 9/11 commentary.
This is my Godzilla headcanon. I just think most films in America where buildings get destroyed have
How about
some
that? Yeah.
9/11
I
stuff.
completely agree. Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's going to be really fun talking about both of those. I really hope King of the Monsters is good, or at least that I enjoy it. And it's going to be fun making Josh watch a whole load of Godzilla. So yeah. All right.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see you in that episode, and we're all done here. Thanks so much for listening, everybody, and tune in next time. Okay, guess you guys just didn't want to say anything.
Oh.
Sorry.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Catch me at the 1975 concert
Should I
with my.
shill? Should I shill my Twitter?
Yeah, Uncle Phobic. Follow.
Yeah,
him.
Uncle Phobic. Middling philosophy takes.
Nice.
That's it.
Awesome. Well, you've got my follow. Okay.